In my pain, I know you can feel it. There I find the comfort in your spirit. And every day you sing it over me. Like water, my love runs free. Oh, there is nothing like your love. There is nothing and no one above. Oh, come be with us, Holy One. Oh, come be with us, Holy One. Anywhere I go.
Good evening, everyone. So this evening we have two guests that's going to be speaking. So I'm so excited to hear our topic for today. But before we get started, I want to first say thank you, thank you, thank you for continuing to follow us in virtual land and also in-house. The Summer Health Series, as many of you all know, and if you do not know, have been going on for 19 years. Can you believe that? Our very own Dr. Pullins had a dream, and that dream has been going on for that long, and I was honored to join him. So we are going to basically be sharing some topics. You all recall last month we focused on a lot of medical and physical issues that we have encountered, and it was a phenomenal opportunity for people to learn so many different things regarding from being a young person to an older person to all types of topics. I don't even want to get into it because I know you've either viewed it or will review it at your own leisure. And if not, please follow us on our Facebook page, Antioch Facebook page, on our Antioch website, as well as YouTube to learn all about our topics that we've shared last month. This month, we're going to focus on a little bit of different topics. We're changing the pace a little bit. The month of July, and yes, we are here during the holiday week because we believe that it's always an opportunity for learning. As you all know, cultivating excellence and nurturing resilience and well-being is our theme this year. And we are going to be focusing on several areas. Tonight, I'm so excited because you all know that we are living in 2025 where AI is alive. So we're going to talk about the rise of artificial intelligence, also known as AI, what it means for you and your health. I want to just kind of give you a tidbit. Next week, we will not be in session on July the 9th. This is where our Church of God in Christ will be celebrating AIMS, and this is Auxiliaries and Ministries. That's going to be located downtown. So if you're comfortable, you've registered, or if you want to learn more about what we do in ministries, we'll be located downtown at Phoenix Convention Center the week of, I think actually the 7th through the 11th, and the 9th we will be there as well. So we will not be in session next week. We're going to follow on July the 16th. It's okay to talk about it. Mental health and the Black experience. We're going to have two phenomenal researchers and psychologists who's going to be talking, husband and wife, who's going to be talking about that special topic. And then on July the 23rd, we're going to be looking at the 4 pillars of the new retirement. And you are going to be very surprised at the topics, focusing on physical and also mental establishments in your financial world, as well as how do you sustain those areas. And then last, we're going to recap with July the 30th, Sustaining Holistic Health from Breakthrough to Impact. This is where our health coaches are going to pull it all together and allow us to continue to sustain what we've learned in the last 2 months. So let's get started. I know you're waiting for this topic for tonight. And before we get started, I would like to ask each of one of us to clear our minds, open our hearts, close our eyes so that we can pray into this session. Heavenly Father, we ask that you touch each and every person that's being delivers this information. We ask that you continue to bless us in obtaining the knowledge. Lord, this topic is going to be interesting, but yet difficult, challenging, but yet easy, informative, but yet educational. And we ask that you continue to Give us that information we need when we are in the healthcare setting, and even when we are in the community. How do we navigate through these systems utilizing AI? We ask that you touch our speakers, particularly Dr. Pullins, who will be facilitating, and our two phenomenal speakers who's going to enlighten us on these various topics. We ask that you touch each person that's in this building, those who are on their way during the traffic and the weather inclement, and we ask that you also touch all those in virtual land. So again, Lord, we thank you, we thank you. We cannot thank you enough, because you are giving us this opportunity through our leader, Pastor Jonathan E. Logan and First Lady Logan, so that we can deliver the information that needs to be delivered to our community. We ask that you continue to touch us, bless us, and pray for us. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Dr. Allen, for that opening. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to another evening of the Antioch Summer Health Series. So tonight we have an exciting topic. It's a topic that is near and dear to my heart, particularly in medicine. This topic has gained a lot of momentum just because of the speed of technology. And so as a lead of a department, it's crucial that physician clinicians are at the table as this technology being rolled out, so that we have some say on how it's rolled out and how it's utilized in healthcare. So tonight, as Dr. Allen said, I do have two excellent guest speakers who I think are well-versed to shed some light on a topic of artificial intelligence. So tonight we're going to talk about what it is, how it works, and how it's shaping the world around us. And so I'm going to introduce my speakers separately, but my first slide, and they may have switched something on me because I had my bio in front of me, but so I'll have to go off of memory for Elder Eddie Hall. We met at Prayer Assembly at one of the men's conferences. I think it was last year. We were both facilitators on different topics, but we got to know each other then. And as we were talking, we came up that we had a similar interest in AI, although he actually has some training, official training in the topic. He actually works. Actually, I may have him say it because I don't want to mess it up. I know he is retired Air Force. I know he's an elder, and you do something with gaming, Indian gaming, in the county. So if I'll get your
Yes,
background.
I'm an IT regulator with the National Indian Gaming Commission. So basically what we do is I do IT for the different casinos around in tribal land. So I will go and audit their IT systems and making sure that they're meeting the requirements that are set forth by the federal government.
Thank you. Yeah, and he has some interesting stories that he was sharing prior to that we can talk off baseball, but some interesting things in that whole community. Oh, and there it is. And you want to let us know who accompanied tonight?
Yes, my lovely wife, Missionary Latisse Hall, is here to give me some support. Give her a hand. She got me covered.
Great. That's great. Two is better than one. So let's get right into the topic of artificial intelligence. So that term is not new. It's something that's been around probably from the 70s or maybe before that. But more recently, it's picked up in the headlines. It's always there. So when we say artificial intelligence, what are we talking about? And what are some common misunderstandings that people have about AI?
When we say artificial intelligence, so I would actually like to pose a question back to those who are participating. Ask them, what is artificial intelligence? How do you see artificial intelligence? And so I guess my question to you is, what is AI? Is it A, machines programmed to answer humans' personal questions? Or is it B, the capability to learn and to understand how to deal with new and trying situations through the using technology? Or is it C, the capacity of a machine to imitate intelligent human behavior? Or D, AI refers to the development of intelligent systems that can perform tasks that typically require human intelligence. So what would you think it would be? All right, very good. The answer is all the above, right? And a lot of people don't understand that, but it's all of the above. And so when you think of artificial intelligence, that's kind of what you should be thinking about. So not to be worried about it, and we'll get more into that in terms of what AI, the understanding AI and how it's being used in society today and what it actually means and the history of it. We'll get into those as well.
So we talk about the misunderstanding. So when people misunderstand and don't understand, usually fear is what comes up. In particular, if AI will take over our jobs, is it going to replace people? Those are like the million-dollar questions that people are asking. But in your view, is that fear justified, and what does the data actually say?
Well, it's good for me to, again, I'm going to flip that to my audience here and ask the question, what do you think? Do you think AI is going to replace all the jobs and we'll all just sit home and watch TV? Or what do you think? You don't think it will replace? Okay.
There are some theories where they say
That will occur. So there's a lot of discussion about what AI will do, and you can listen to some of those that are right now running companies that use AI, some of those that are considered subject matter experts on AI, and some that own companies that create AI, and you'll get different answers. But the Economic Forum, the World Economic Forum, did a study and generated a report that said AI is going to replace 85 million jobs. But in that same report, it said AI will create 97 million jobs. So really, when you think of AI from an occupational standpoint, it's really going to be people will just have to shift. They're going to have to shift to the new world that we're in, right? AI is the new thing, right? Just like when computers first came out, right? People had to shift, and you can go back even further than that. We went from an agricultural society we started shifting to technology, and so getting a degree in agriculture, a lot of people, had to deviate and go to do something if they really wanted employment, to really shift into what is currently being used in society. So AI is no different, right? We're just going to have to be willing to challenge yourself and get into that genre so that so you can find gainful employment and as well as grow as society changes.
Perfect. So you talked about going from agriculture to our industrial revolution. Can you give a history of AI?
Absolutely.
Historically?
Absolutely. In fact, most people think artificial intelligence is some kind of new phenomenon, right? But AI actually goes back to the 1950s. It goes back further than that, but we'll just deal with it from a computer machine standpoint of 1950. In fact, there's a gentleman by the name of Alan Turing. He was a computer scientist, and he was the first one to present a test when he was at the university that if a computer can fool a human into thinking it's human, then it would be called an intelligent computer. And about 5 years later, there was another computer scientist by the name of John McCarthy, and he postulated the whole phrase artificial intelligence. And so you started seeing that term being used in a lot of the Ivy League schools around the country and around the world. So it's not a new phenomenon. It actually goes, like I said, back to 1950. So you'll see there's this transition that's happening. It moved really slow. In fact, you'll see some movies, if you were to go and look back at some movies that were made by Hollywood, you'll see glimpses of artificial intelligence being talked about. And then in the 1970s, there was kind of a lull. The technology was growing, but then there was a kind of a lull that happened. But then it picked up again with something called machine learning. And with machine learning, that was kind of the you'll see in technology, there's always some new technology that causes society to take a next leap, go to the next level. And then you see an information explosion. And so that was machine learning. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But that took us from about 1980 to about 2010. And then there was another breakthrough that happened right in early 2000s, and that was called deep learning. And so deep learning took us to another level, and so we're experiencing that explosion. And so that's why you're seeing the things that are happening now in terms of AI. And so I'll go a little bit more in depth with that if we just continue on. So from the 1950s, when artificial intelligence when it was starting to be called artificial intelligence, it was encompassing of anything that had to do with the science and engineering of intelligent machines. And so as that continued to happen, as you move forward, again, it was moving rather slow, but it was moving progressively. And then around 1974, now that was called artificial intelligence, or AI. But in 1974, right around that time frame, 74 to 80, is when machine learning began to take place. And machine learning is where there's something called natural language processing. And that's a critical component, because that was the way that computers could communicate in human language. And because computers were able to communicate in human language, now comes the explosion, right? Because that translation, that communication breakdown is now we're speaking the same language, right? And so that's when it began to gain momentum. And then from machine learning, now when we talk about machine learning, we're talking about supervised, unsupervised, and recurring, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But then we got into deep learning, and when you think of deep learning, think of it in terms of the human brain, and that's what a lot of people don't understand about AI. Humans created it, right? So they had to have an idea of what to base it on, and so it's really based on the human brain. So when we talk about deep learning, we're talking about neural networks. So think of it in terms of a human being. Like, there's a certain part of your brain you use to see images. There's another part of your brain that you use to speak. And so these neural networks were being created, and such that as these neural networks are being created, they're being connected, and you're able to do more now. In fact, there's something called LLMs, if you ever heard that expression, that term, large language models. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of that, but through large language models, we got ChatGPT, and we got these different types of tools that you can use that deal with languages. And so that's why it's easy to write papers and things of that sort. All of that comes from the large language model. In fact, when you look at Google and Microsoft, some of these that have search engines, you can ask right through the search engine a question, and it's the large language model that's allowing you to be able to get that information that you request. And another thing is machine learning required great amounts of data. Okay, so in order for them to answer those questions, they needed data. So you'll notice everyone is trying to get data. The more information I get, the stronger AI can perform. And so right now, AI is performing rather well, because we're getting a lot of information. AI is getting, I say we, but AI is gaining a lot of information. And so when you step into deep learning, that's of course even greater information. And through deep learning is where the neural networks are being created. So we'll continue on and get into the impact of that.
Quick question for the audience. By a show of hands, how many of you have used AI at all for anything to help you with something get accomplished? Okay. And if you haven't, that's fine. I just want to get a hand. The other thing, as he's talking and he's using all of these large language models, deep learning, machine learning, NLP, I know it sounds overwhelming initially, and it did to me. But I've taken some courses to learn about, I'm not trying to become a computer engineer, but I want to kind of understand the basics of how these machines, how do they make these algorithms and stuff like that. And I'll tell you, the more times you see it, now when he talks, it's like he's speaking English to me, because I've studied it to know what he's talking about. But the more you learn it, and so I just recommend, just get a glossary of common artificial intelligent terms, and just read over that. It'll come to you and make sense on that, because, like I said, the more you understand the basics of it, it makes sense of why it works and how you should use it. And hopefully tonight, even if you don't memorize all these terminologies that he's talking about, that you will leave feeling comfortable that I can go home or tomorrow and actually utilize it for myself.
Absolutely. And I would just add, I talked about search engines. One of the things you can do is just type in what is NLP in the search engine, right? and you know what? AI will give you the answer. AI will give you the answer.
So can you tell us a little bit, if I don't have these slides in order, let me know. But if you can walk us briefly, you talked about how it evolved. What are the different types of AI, and where are we now on the spectrum, and how close are we to a stronger AI?
Well, great question. There are three different types of AI. There's AI that's all encompassing. So most of the time when we talk about AI, the average person, when they say AI, they're really talking about all of AI, right? But there are basically three types of AI. There's artificial intelligence, which is what I talked about, which kind of took us through from 1950 even to around 2000 or so. Even though we were at the stage of machine learning and deep learning in that time frame, but artificial intelligence would be, for example, I purchased a new car a couple years ago, and when I got in the car, it was a Sunday morning, and started my car, my GPS system showed me a map and directions to my church. And I said, how does the car know that I'm going to church this morning? So when we talk about artificial intelligence, we're talking about it's also called weak AI. And weak AI is just like it sounds. It is just giving you general information that you can use. So for example, it could be your navigation system, something of that sort, where it just gives you general information. Well, then there's something else called artificial general intelligence, or general AI. If you may have heard that term, general AI. Well, when you get into general AI, now that's the idea that systems will be able to perform like humans. So we are in the infancy of artificial general intelligence, or AGI, and you can look that up as well. And that is where AI is able to do a lot of the functions. The goal of full AGI would be for everyone will have a robot in their house doing chores and things of that sort. Okay, so when you think of full-grown AGI, that's a picture of what that looks like. And Elon Musk actually has that in some areas of his company. So keep that. And actually, some people have it actually in their homes right now too as well. So those are two. And the third one is called ASI, which stands for artificial superintelligence, so you can call it strong AI. That's another title that they give it. And so strong AI is where we believe, or subject matter experts believe, that AI will eventually get to, and that's where computers have its own consciousness. Okay, seems way out there. In fact, subject matter experts will say that that's down the road, but as you know, technology is evolving at a rapid rate. So those are the three different types of AI.
Yeah, hopefully in Q&A, we'll talk some more about some of the information. There are some sources and things that I follow that gives you up-to-date stuff that's coming, and it doesn't make the news, but tell you stuff that's going on, and you're correct. We are very close. So now the AI is getting even more powerful, and when it starts to learn, what's the difference between AI and machine learning?
Great question. AI, let me get some clarity from you. When you say AI, are you talking about general AI?
Yes, general.
Okay, general AI and machine learning. You need machine learning to have general AI. So as I talked about earlier, artificial intelligence, we had weak AI, right? Before you had machine learning. So when you think of machine learning, think of situations where you're asking a question, you're setting the table. Let's say, for example, I had a table of spam emails. I want the AI to know the difference between a spam email and a real email. Well, machine learning tables are developed such that it can recognize, based on labeling, what a spam message is. And if I generate enough of those spam messages, eventually through machine learning, that's called supervised learning, because I'm injecting the different types of spam emails, okay? And so they're able to, AI, the system eventually recognizes it, and there's something called recurring learning. And so in recurring learning, that's how it's able to remember, okay, this is a spam, and this is a real. And so that's one of the distinctions when you talk about AGI and regular, or machine learning and AI. You need machine learning to really enhance artificial intelligence, or AI.
So the third component was deep learning.
Deep learning.
And you talked about how it's built on the model of the human brain and the neural networks. Can you talk a little bit more how that all works together?
Yeah, so to keep it, and I'll try to be as surface as I possibly can. When we talk about deep learning, so you have what's called an input, you have hidden, and then you have an output in terms of thinking of a brain and how the brain works. And so that hidden learning is something, just like in the human brain, we don't know why there's a certain part of our brain that causes us to be able to understand, or another part of our brain that allows us to be able to see colors or see pictures, or be able to, why one person can draw and another person can, we don't know the details of it, that's hidden, right? Well, neural learning or deep learning is kind of similar to that. So the more information that's put in, neural networks allow, how it does it, it's really, it's really techie, but it allows it to be able to combine those different networks. Like there's something called voice tools. Those are applications that you can buy that AI uses to recreate your voice. Or there could be surveillance visual tools, video tools. In my job, in fact, there's AI that's out there, that's tools that are being sold that AI can, through the camera, see who a person is and know who they are, and see them in every part of a casino. And so if anything happens, they know exactly who the person is and where they are. And AI can determine if it's male or female, so it can recognize the gait of the walk. And so those are different neural networks that allow you to be able to do that. So I hope that kind of explains it.
Yeah, could you share a few high-impact ways AI is shaping our world today, or just global industries in general?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. There's so many. There's a lot of them we don't even realize that are happening. There are a lot of companies right now that are using AI. Again, I mentioned the search engine. You can Google. In fact, you can look at the slide there. I've got an arrow pointing to the search engine. And there's something called Copilot. Microsoft has its version. Google has its version, Google Gemini. There are different companies that are offering these different AI tools. Maybe, a couple years ago, I went to buy a car, brand new car. And when I went to the website, let's say Toyota.com, went to the website, there was a little box down in there, and it through a large language model, asked me, hey, may I help you? And so I began to communicate with this chat box. And so when I was good with everything that I needed, I went to the store and said, may I speak to Susan? The chatbot's name was Susan. And so the head salesman said, well, we don't have anyone here named Sue that works here named Susan. You actually were speaking to AI. So there's some things that AI offers that are really outstanding. AI can do things that really reduce confusion. They bring clarity step by step. So there's a lot of great things, and we're just really touching the surface of what AI can do. So don't just look at it as this scary tool, this new world we're stepping in. There are so many advantages to using AI.
So that we're right on time. That is a great introductory overview. So we want to make a transition, since this is a summer health series, and we want our next speaker to come up. So if you don't mind switching, I'll bring you back up in a little bit. And we want to talk about how we use, give him a hand. How do we use this powerful technology to impact us as patients and then even providers here? So I'm going to keep going. So Dr. Underhill has been here before. He was here actually last year. We talked about a different topic, but he is in our department. We have 4 sites. And so he and I are probably number one and number two, well, I would say equals, as far as AI, as far as the department, is somewhat interesting. You know, the reason why I asked how many people have used it, because you'd be surprised. You would think, you know, a tool that would help you be more efficient, and, you know, get home on time, you would roll it out to the department and people would just jump on, but they're not. They're slow to using it. And so we want to make sure we get the information out so you are understanding what AI is and how it actually make life better. So again, this is Dr. Underhill. He's one of the physicians, actually the site lead at the Mayo Clinic Arrowhead, comes from Colorado, correct? And so he served in the military as well. So I have two veterans here helping out tonight. But yeah, he's very interested in it. And so we are very interested in making sure that we make literacy around AI available to everyone. So welcome, Dr. Underhill.
Thank you.
So getting into AI, we talked about it from a general standpoint. Let's talk about it from a healthcare setting. So what are some real, or what is AI in healthcare? Let's start there.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Elder Hall did a great job explaining the details, and he knows a lot more about the nuance of this than I do, certainly. But I can tell you how maybe we apply it in our day-to-day world. So think about a scenario where today you show up and you go see your doctor for a chief complaint of something, and maybe you did a little research on Google, maybe you didn't, and you walk in, your doctor, you know, has a clipboard on the door before you walk and reviews it, or maybe opens the electronic medical record, rolls in and knows a little bit about your history, but not a lot, just enough, and then asks you what you think is going on. You go through this whole litany of questions and answers, and you kind of come up with a decision on what you're going to do next. And that's kind of how we practice for decades. With the EMRs, or electronic health records, now we got this massive amount of data, and we don't really quite know how to surface through that. It is too much for us. So we are relying on what we know based on our background, our skill sets, and our ability to acquire the information over time, and then hopefully we learned enough about you, the patient, in the electronic medical record. What we're seeing now with AI is it's going to take all that massive data, synthesize it for us, right at the point of care, to now we know you like we've known you for your whole life, and be able to ask questions based on what you tell us, grab it from the large amounts of data, and hopefully deliver a precise treatment plan for you. And that's where we see it going overall. So where do we use it now? Think about anything that can be codified, and Elder Hall can speak more to that, but anything that you can assign a number, an integer, an algorithm to in a data set, we can use as AI. That's large language models, that's deep learning, those neural networks that are being created. And we're using it day in and day out. Now, we've used it for years in these machine learnings like ECGs and some basic readings on imaging studies, but now we're going to a whole nother level that I think, if we do this correctly, is going to make each and every one of us healthier down the road. So things we're using now, you know, voice dictation. Used to be you pen and paper everything, and then you started speaking into a phone, and it would transcribe it. Now, you just turn your phone on, put it on the desk, and you start talking like you and I are talking. And the notes created for you. Everything you and I had a conversation about is now recorded in your words in a medical document. So now when you walk out of that room and look at your note, it's what you said in our conversation back and forth, instead of some template that may or may not have been made for an insurance company to reimburse the hospital system. So now it's more transparent, more honest. It's actually what happened in the room. It's the art of medicine. And of course, cancer screenings like mammograms and colonoscopies, these things are typically read by a human, but with the assistance and pattern recognition of neural networks, we can get more precise and see patterns that maybe don't exist in our mind's eye when we see it first go. We can see it down the road before something happens. So we're going to start seeing some of those. And then things that we know like heart rate, EKG, etc. So to the next slide is, clipboard to code. And, Dr. Pollins and I have talked, and to the point about, will this replace physicians or clinicians? And the reality is no, but you will be replaced by a physician who's using AI if you're not using AI. And that's probably true in other industries as well. And certainly Dr. Pollins and I would tell you, and all our colleagues, if you're not using AI now, you're going to need to, because someone else is going to use it. They're going to be better than you are at your job. So learn to use it. So how we might see it now, I already made mention to the fact that we use a ambient noise recognition where we can capture the information that's being had in the appointment. And that allows us to chart better. So you think about, we're lucky we get the benefit of having 30 minutes to see patients. But if you're in a busy community clinic, maybe you only get 10 or 15. And you got to go dictate that note real quick. That's 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes. Well, this takes that away. So now you spend 3 minutes times maybe 5,000 patient visits a year. Imagine how much time that clinician's saving on just dictation alone that they can devote to you. And we think about pathology and labs and imaging, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the studies that we're seeing now, but clinicians are able to recognize diseases earlier just through pattern recognition. And that pattern recognition might diagnose melanoma faster, maybe dementia, maybe cancers that haven't been seen yet. So it's going to be a massive improvement in how we can deliver care faster. And then the regenerative AI down the road, where now they can look at maybe protein synthesis that we can't do or takes years to develop pharmaceuticals. Maybe we can do that in 1 year instead of 10. Now we get new drugs, new therapies, new testing that might help us heal people quicker. So it's quite interesting. And you folks use it now, right? We have our Apple Watches, we have Fitbits, we have sleep monitors. Who doesn't go to Google and do a symptom checker when I have a headache or something like that? So I think we're all using them. They're going to get better, and the better you're prepared for your office visit with your clinician, the better healthcare you're going to get. And then you're going to know on the other end, if you're a physician like Dr. Pollins who's using AI, he's seen it too. So you're together going to come up with the best treatment plan possible.
Yeah, so I had just a quick story. I had a patient come in the last 2 weeks, and she was seeing actually the chair of rheumatology at Mayo Clinic Rochester. And she had a symptom presentation which just didn't quite fit lupus, the kind of common rheumatoid arthritis, but they knew something was wrong with her, but they couldn't figure out what it was. And so she went to, and she's in Rochester. I had a video meeting with her. And so she went to ChatGPT and she spoke to it with the voice assistant and told ChatGPT exactly what her symptoms were. And it came out with a differential diagnosis, what the possibilities of diagnosis was. And so she went back to the chair, rheumatology there in Rochester, and said, hey, I know you doctors don't like to have us come and bring these Google lists of symptoms or diagnosis, but I was so frustrated because you guys haven't been able to tell me what's going on with me. Can you at least take a look at it? So he did. He looked at it, and he went through a couple of the first things on the list, and he said, no, definitely not. We've already ruled that out. But there was one diagnosis on there that he said, I didn't think of that one. I guess that is a possibility. And this particular condition required a genetic testing. So it wasn't just a normal run-of-the-mill type blood test. And so long story short, she had this genetic disorder. And so because you have all of medical knowledge in one place, we're humans, so we're fallible. So there's things that sometimes there may be something we don't consider. And in her condition situation, it did work. So it's just a pre-example of, physicians won't be replaced, but they will be replaced by physicians who use AI. And that's like I get in any business. So you talked about ambient dictation. There's some other current AI tools we're using now in medicine.
Yeah, maybe we can go to the next slide. So if you can look and see, maybe pop that next slide up. I don't know if they can see it or not. So these are some examples that are currently being used. And the lady on my left, maybe you're right, she has something called a Zio patch. So think about if you go see your PCP or a cardiologist, you want to monitor your heart rate for maybe 2 weeks or so or longer. Call that a Holter monitor, and you put a bunch of wires on. You carry a device, and you got to go wherever you're at, and it's a little awkward and cumbersome. Gets in the way. Sometimes it records, sometimes it doesn't. But this Zio patch is a very slick piece of tape or a patch that sticks right on your heart area, and it monitors your heart like that Holter monitor might for 14 days straight. It's going to help us get arrhythmias, AFibs, all these unique heart things that maybe we wouldn't catch with that Holter monitor, or more importantly, it allows us to use it easier. So now we can take something like this and access a much greater population. The phone in the middle is the actual device that Dr. Pollins and I were using. It's an iPhone, and on that is a software that is ambient noise recognition. You just put the play button, it records our conversation, types the note for us, which is fantastic. The bottom one there is called the Gallery. It's basically a liquid biopsy. So now when you go get blood testing done, we have a select few that are pretty common, but we're getting new technology that helps us look at the DNA and then predict down the road what types of malignancies you as an individual patient might be prone to. And this particular test is one of the new things we're seeing that I think in our careers, and certainly as patients, we're going to have these kind of blood tests plus your CBCs and your cholesterols. These would be the tools that we'll have hopefully 1, 5, 10 years that now are going a much different level in diagnosing certain conditions that we may not know we have. So liquid biopsy is kind of the new push towards diagnosing cancer earlier. Maybe the next slide. And then at ECG, so Dr. Pollins did this study out of Mayo Clinic, and typically you get an ECG and it gives you what's happening in the moment, what's happened, or maybe what's happened in the past. It doesn't actually predict the future. But this particular study looked at pattern recognition over decades with millions of ECGs, and what they found that there are certain patterns that are within an ECG that might predict heart failure. So this is actually one of my patients, and he had an ECG that suggested he might have a low squeezing capacity of his heart, something called cardiomyopathy. So we ended up doing an echocardiogram on him. Had no symptoms. He just got an echocardiogram because of this. Turns out he did. He had dilated cardiomyopathy, and his ejection fraction, or his squeezing capacity of his heart, was so low that he actually required a defibrillator to be placed. Saved his life. Now, he saved his life before something happened, because this man may have presented 6 months, a year, 2 years with a sudden cardiac death. So this is a good example of that new technology that's going to help predict things before they happen. And then that maybe go back to that, sorry. Open evidence. Dr. Pollins and I will tell you we are bombarded with the amount of health information that we need to know. And it's impossible for us to know it all. And so we can read as many journals, but just not enough hours in the day to read all the information we have. So we will use something like open evidence where we can type in a prompt, a question that we may have. And this will synthesize all the relevant, high-quality, evidence-based journals to the point of the question that we asked and provide it to us in a paragraph or two. So no longer the days of going to the library or spending hours at night researching a unique case. We can pull it right up at the point of care, sometimes with the patient, and say, what's going on? Let's type this up. I'm not quite sure. It's fantastic. I think it's a game changer for us. And then that bottom one there is a really unique tool. That's called a point of care ultrasound. This individual is using, and we use it a lot now in the emergency department. We use it a lot now on surgical rounds, and our medical students are learning this as we speak, and it's very easy. It's just a point-of-care ultrasound that you can stick anywhere and look at certain things. The benefit of it is now there's an AI program with it that will tell you, hey, you know what, that person has a gallstone, or maybe that person has a cellulitis or an abscess brewing by just looking at that ultrasound. And so these are the tools that we can have. So instead of sending you to the hospital, getting an ultrasound in 2 weeks to find out if your right upper quadrant plane's a gallbladder or not, we can look right there in the point of care in the office, and it's pretty accurate. Maybe the next slide. And then, of course, the big one is the Da Vinci robotic surgical system that's in place, and we use this across many major hospitals around the world. We use this. The neat thing about this is becoming the next phase of surgery, very precise, and you can see all these surgeons are using essentially a joystick to guide the surgery. Now, the benefit of this is you can imagine with artificial intelligence and virtual reality, you might be a hospital somewhere remote, buy a Da Vinci machine, and maybe you have a world-class surgeon here in another town who's going to operate that through virtual reality, maybe implant an MRI on top of that, and then be able to do surgery remotely, just like you were at Mayo Clinic Hospital or Massachusetts General Hospital. So anywhere in the world, as long as they have a device like a robotic Da Vinci. So very, very interesting times.
So, Dr. Underhill, I talk a lot because we follow some, and sometimes when we read the technology, it almost blows your mind because stuff that you grew up seeing the Jetsons and all these shows that you're like, oh, that's never gonna happen, and then you read and it's actually happening like right now. I know there's a lot of companies that are doing neural implants now into the brain, and so one company I know is looking at how to bring vision back to people by putting it in the occipital lobe. But then obviously there's the people like Elon Musk who want to take it further and use it in the military so that they can also see infrared without the goggles. So the implant will take the images and magnify it and let them see in the dark. And so it's just very sci-fi the way it's going. So let's talk about the road ahead. What are we seeing in the next 3 to 5 years for AI in healthcare?
Yeah, great question. So I think some of this is what we've already made mention to, but think about virtual physicians. So you might be a patient of Dr. Pullins, and you're somewhere in the Grand Canyon, you sprain an ankle, and you call up to Dr. Pullins, and a hologram pops up, and there he is. Dr. Pullins, and he's giving you medical advice right there at the point of care. And you're in the Grand Canyon, he's somewhere on the golf course, but it's working. And that's that virtual physician or clinician that's there with you when you need it. Or maybe you might need more precision food intake based on your microbiome. I think what we'll find is you'll have food, or hopefully medications at least, that are geared towards you, the unique individual. And that's where medicine is going, really precision-based medicine. I think we're going to see, now we typically have to ask patients for their response, when it comes to depression or anxiety. We have them fill out tables and scores, and people are pretty good about filling them out, but sometimes they won't. And maybe they don't know they're depressed yet, or they're feeling something's wrong, but they're not quite being able to put a name to it. You might be able to see by the speech that they have, or the handwriting, or the level of texting that they're giving, that maybe this person has anxiety or depression, or maybe they're at risk for suicide. We can catch that before, just based on speech recognition or handwriting. It's pretty interesting. And then Dr. Pullins made mention, implanted devices. You think about the Terminator or Star Wars, and how everything was put into these, Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker. Well, we're kind of going that way a little bit, right? And so maybe Neuralink or some of these other devices are going to be useful in treating diseases. So, for example, right now at Mayo Clinic, we do surgery on essential tremors and Parkinson's disease. And so maybe these new implanted devices will be smaller rather than bigger as they are now. We may be able to correct people's tremors or Parkinson's or debilitations by just a quick neural link or something to that nature, an implantable device that now gives them quality of life or longevity. So it's really interesting, very interesting.
All right, I need some help from the back because I'm not progressing here. Oh, there we go. Let me go back one. Yeah, so I will talk on this slide because this when Dr. O'Neill was asking me, we had a big technology exchange at Mayo Clinic. So we had all these vendors come to Mayo Clinic Hospital and show us all their newest gadgets and technology. And so when I was getting ready to leave, I saw some people standing by this area, and so the vendor stopped and said, hey, come, let me show you what this thing can do. And so you can't see, but in the middle, there was a kind of a stage you stand on, and this camera kind of goes around you and gives you 360. And then after that, it actually makes a real version of me. So you can't see it because this is still, but this video is moving. And so with the thought this company is having is that you can do a at-home doctor visit with me, so it's my voice, takes my audio, and so, but it's using AI to speak for me. So it's not really me. It's my voice, my movements, my mannerisms, but it's asking questions. So it was just, I mean, it's probably more fun than anything, but this is kind of the things where technology is going here.
Yeah, so this is kind of a good example of, if you think how medicine works now, we may get rare and complex diseases that we can't quite figure out at the point of care. So we have groups that get together and meet. We might call them tumor boards to determine what's the best course of action, or maybe what's the diagnosis, what tests should we do, what procedures should we perform, etc. And so this happens a fair amount. And every month, New England Journal of Medicine, which is essentially one of our bigger journals, we'll give these rare and complex cases and then give out to the public, and clinicians read them and try to figure out if they can solve the case on their own. And on average, the average general physician, like maybe Dr. Pollins or myself, might get it right 20-30% of the time, right, on our own. Well, Google, or I'm sorry, this is Microsoft. They put together essentially what they call agent AIs, and Elder Hall can talk more to that, but basically they specific AI tools looking at how to solve a problem from different avenues. So you might have a cardiologist, a rheumatologist, a surgeon in a room. Well, they did this with AI, looking at all these different areas of how you might ask a question. One asked, what's the right test? What's the diagnosis? What's the cost-effective way of delivering a treatment? And they put it into this algorithm. And long story short is this algorithm produced a success rate around 85%. So the average physician on our own, we don't have all these tools necessarily, but it got it right about 85% of the time. And it did it about 20% less than what the average physician might charge. So you can imagine what that looks like and what that means for us as individuals, as patients, and clinicians too, but for our healthcare industry as well. We might be able to reduce the cost of healthcare and make it more efficient. Now this isn't peer reviewed yet, but I think you'll see this come out in probably the next couple months. You can go to the next slide. And that kind of explains what it was. So they did a great job on demonstrating what AI can be if used in the same way that we use medicine now. And then another example of this is just published last month in the Journal of Neurology. Mayo Clinic did a study looking at pattern recognition of what they call FDG PET scans. So these are really glucose-dependent PET scans, and long story short is glucose kind of goes to the area of the brain, and you can determine different patterns based on its uptake. And certain types of dementia, there's 8 or 9 different types of dementia, not just Alzheimer's, there's vascular, there's Alzheimer's, there's Parkinson's dementia, there's different types. They were able to look based on pattern recognition through machine-based learning and clinical decision support tools and determine what type of dementia a person had just based on the imaging alone. Now, when we have that tool without this machine learning, we get it right about 65-70% of the time. But with the addition of this study showed they got it right about 90% of the time. So better than what you might get in your neurologist office. And sometimes the neurologist has to go another level and maybe do spinal taps or lumbar punctures, do more further testing that are cumbersome, costly, painful. But now you're starting to see that number approximate just with a good old-fashioned PET scan. So these are the things that we're seeing with pattern recognition and AI and making medicine more efficient and at the end of the day, more effective.
So with the release of all of this technology, obviously it also introduces the issue of inequities, biases. How does inequity in the data that we have for AI and these algorithms affect health outcomes, and what should we do to protect fairness in care?
Yeah, great question. So we may mention that AI takes data, and if we think back, where does data come from? Well, it comes back to the internet, and where was the data produced? Well, generally speaking, marginalized populations weren't involved in these data set collections. So if we just take that data set and then try to apply it again to the current scenario, we get the same problem. Marginalized communities don't get recognized. So the idea is we need to have people at the forefront of this that look at these biases that existed previously in these data sets and say, does the current data set, does the current algorithm, deep learning neural connections take into account those marginalized populations? And I think we're seeing it. Stanford, which is, Dr. Pollins and I did a course out of Stanford, I think Harvard too, Mayo Clinic. Certainly in medicine, I think you're seeing a big push to, let's put some parameters, let's put some brakes on this and see, are we really capturing the data we want for everybody rather than just the data that we had previously on, a lot of, middle-aged white males and females. That's where a lot of the research comes from. And the reality is we need research that represents everybody. AI can do it, but we have to make sure we train it so it does.
Thank you for saying that. I think that's definitely something we want to make sure we do not lose sight of. We talked about the fear of being replaced. Why should the people in the audience and those both here and virtually, and why should they want a human doctor?
Well, we think back about healing and what healing really means. And healing is not necessarily about an algorithm or a code. It's really about just love and the opportunity to touch someone, be with them when they're struggling or there's an illness. No machine can do that. No matter how much they go and whether they become conscious or not, I don't think anyone can really understand what it means when you're at the bedside and your nurse comes up to you and understands how you feel. And so in healthcare particularly, you're never going to see a machine replace a caregiver. And these caregivers could be your family member, a nurse, a physician. And so they're not, again, I think the slide says it, discernment is human, it's not digital. And more importantly, dignity is a lot deeper than data. So we talk about data sets, and that's all AI is really data sets, and then creating new data. But at the end of the day, you look across your partner when they're struggling, and you look in her eyes or his eyes, and that's human.
So in Christian circles, the what would Jesus do would come up a lot on wristbands and things like that. Let's talk about AI. What's your thoughts there? Would that be something you think he'd approve of?
I think we've gone back and forth on this in conversation, and both my wife and I have as well. And I think AI, God gives us gifts, and he throws us stuff whenever we need it. And I think AI is maybe God's gift to us to say, hey, use this wisely, but it's God's tool for us to use. And like anything, we could misuse it, and there will be bad actors. But I think God, Jesus, is just trying to give us another avenue of how to be better and more connected to Him. And I think that's the ultimate goal here. Is it's a tool, but the ultimate tool is bringing us closer to God.
So give me a final thought to close. What's one message you hope people leave with tonight when it comes to AI, health, and faith?
Yeah, I think AI is amazing. I think if you can harness what it really means, and Elder Hall made mention, go out and learn about it. Dr. Pollins, go out and learn about it. I think it'll prepare you for whatever health endeavor you may face. It'll prepare you for what you should anticipate and expect. It'll make you better as a patient, certainly in the healthcare industry, and your healthcare experience should be better. The idea is technology is a tool, love is the calling ultimately. Faith has to be at the foundation of this. If we get bad actors that harness this information and try to force it upon us without people like you and us at the forefront developing it, I think it's a way that's going to take us down a pathway where we're at now, where marginalized communities aren't getting recognized. They're missing from the puzzle. I feel like this is a way to rectify that if we do it correctly and bring us all together closer as humans to God, and faith has to be at the foundation of it.
Thank you, Dr. Unhill. Let's give him a hand. If we can get Elder Hall a mic, I'm going to relinquish my stand and let him come up as we open up for questions and answers. Thank you. 30 minutes to go over AI is very quick. So if you felt a little overwhelmed hearing this stuff, that's fine. It's a lot of information. It's a new language. But I want to open it up to questions. And while you are, first let me see if there's a question. If not, I do have a question. Anyone have a starting question? Yes, so I'll start here and I'll come back to my question. Thank you. Go ahead.
I have a question on when you were talking about the glucose uptake and being able to identify the different types of dementia. Is the glucose tagged or anything, or it's just normal regular glucose? Because the brain uptakes glucose automatic, right?
Yeah, great question. So it's a certain type of glucose that they would infuse during the CT scan, and then the area of the brain would, for lack of better words, kind of lights up on the scan, and you can see where it's uptaken in certain areas or not taken up in certain areas, and that would then suggest that area is either deficient in something or would be more like a pattern consistent with a certain type of dementia in this case. Great question.
Also, I had another one about the Neuralink dealies that you made. Are they already putting those in people's brains?
They have been FDA approved to start those testing to do those, but I don't know that it's gold standard yet, practice of using yet, but
Thank
yes.
Thank you.
Oh, we got here. In white. She's done. Oh, she's done. Oh, she,
AI in the mental health profession, I was reading an article where they said in the future, in terms of therapy and things of this nature, rather than have a live being, it would be sort of like a robot that's questioning the person to try to determine whether it's bipolar symptoms, schizophrenic symptoms, and the treatment as well. How is that? I mean, can you speak to that?
I can, yeah, great question. So the question is, in the future or currently, is there going to be AI that's going to help both diagnose and treat mental illness? And we are currently piloting a tool, if you will, an app or a program that is based on that. So there are certain types of therapy that are what we call evidence-based and algorithmic. So that would be insomnia treatment, anxiety, and we call that cognitive-based therapy, and it's fairly scripted. There's some patterns you can go off of, and we have a group of psychiatrists that are piloting a process that would then be similar to the Sue chatbot you had at Toyota, where you would maybe sign up for insomnia CBT therapy, and it might be in your PCP's voice, or might be putting Dr. Poland's voice talking to you on a phone or in a conversation, and you're typing your response or saying your response, and it goes down an algorithm, if this, do that, and it generates a evidence-based, cognitive-based therapy response. Now, where we're struggling a little bit with it is, what happens if you go off tangent and do something different, and that piece is being brought in. So we kind of refer to this, the human in the loop. And you always have to have a human in the loop. And so in this process, sir, that's what we're looking at is, yes, garden variety, cognitive-based therapy for the individual that's fairly straightforward with a human in the loop guiding the conversation through AI, but you're always one piece of the puzzle away from the human calling you or talking to you and taking care of. But yes, it's here, it's being piloted, and for a area of the healthcare industry like mental health, where we don't have enough therapists, we don't have enough mental health support, this has proven to be a pretty valuable tool for a lot of people.
So the AI wouldn't exactly be doing the psychotherapy or that sort of thing?
No, really, the algorithm is developed by the psychiatrist. So in this case, the psychiatry develops these evidence-based guidelines and these algorithms that if you have this, you do that. So these are all psychiatry-driven protocols that you would just follow, almost if you were taking a course online. So yeah, they're set up for that. And more difficult cases like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, this wouldn't be something they could use for. Those are too complicated. These are for more straightforward diagnosis. Great question.
Doctor, you mentioned something about the PT scans. Is the technology such that maybe a person wouldn't have to go through the tube, to get that same reading? Because I have a friend who's going through some things, and it's a fear that she has.
Yeah, great question. I think that comes up a lot is obviously the claustrophobia that takes place with these. I don't know any off the top of my head that's available yet. I know we have stand-up MRIs and CT scans, and I know they're trying to put into place things that are maybe a little bit more malleable for us to get in and get out. But right now, I don't know of anything that would allow you to walk through something and walk back and scan. But I would be surprised if they don't have it in 5 to 10 years. I think that's going to be something we'll see. We just don't have it yet.
I want to ask a question to Elder right quick. You pointed out, and Doc gave it away, and I saw you smiling with the Jetsons, because that was actually referenced. You just didn't say it. Another one that I thought about was iRobot with the cognitive. For lay individuals, because you guys are very high level up there, could you give us another program that you would recommend that we should look at to give us a better feel of where we see ourselves in AI? And maybe a movie, television, something that would help us. I just saw G20 on the plane the other day. And when I saw that, I'm like, no way. So with Viola Davis. So again, could you kind of give us something that,
Yes, well, I thought iRobot is a great example of where we are right now, and that would be AGI. Remember, I talked about the different artificial general intelligence, where the computer or the robot is able to do things like humans do them. And iRobot, if you ever watch that movie, that's exactly what it would be like. Now, keep in mind there that something like that is going to be connected to the World Wide Web, right? You need a network to be able to do those things, right? To give up-to-date information. And so that's the unique thing about AI is always learning. It's always, and even in of course in the healthcare field as well. So as you see different things, it helps doctors get more current information. So as someone is inputting, right, that human in the loop, someone is giving that data to the neural network, right? Remember I talked about input, that hidden learning, and then output. That is happening in its computations, its algorithms, and so neural networks are being developed over and over again. So it's growing. Now, what was mentioned earlier, there are definitely some issues that, you know, AI is working through, because all that data has what we call bias, and that bias plays a major role in the information that you're gaining, right? So that's another reason why you need humans in the loop, right? Because you want the human to be able to catch that, right? There's some surveillance software that's out now, tools that are out, and they found that you know, it was identifying this gentleman who came into the store as a criminal, and it's because how the algorithm was written, the code, he was being identified, and so those are the kind of biases that may be in the network that has to be ironed out in terms of AI. So it's a continually growing, right? So it's definitely, but there's so many advantages to it.
I wanted to throw one more thing out. I apologize. It's not just AI that has that stereotypical statement.
Right, because who is the one inputting this data, right?
Right.
So it's starting off bias.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Doc talked about, you know, what demographic it was
Right.
originally, right? So
Yes.
it's starting off with bias in it. So we gotta
Okay, I
work
had to
that out.
throw that in. Go ahead, Alder Baker.
Amen. Dr. Underhill, Elder Hall, thank you for your time here this evening. My question is there any concern over the over-reliance of AI, if that will conflict in developing fundamental knowledge and skills of future med students or future technicians? You guys have any concerns over that?
Yeah, great question. So the question is, using AI, will it make us lazy over time? And interesting you say that, because there was a study that just came out about 2 weeks ago, and it was basically in three groups, I think it was, where one group would do an essay, 4 essays, and one group had no notes, good old-fashioned do your own research. One group had AI, and they used ChatGPT to do their essay, and the prompt was the same, and I think it was only 2 groups, I think it was. And so the first group, they had 4 essays, and they did well across all 4 essays. But the ChatGPT group did better in the first and second and third essay, but they had to use the 4th essay without ChatGPT. And the moral of the story is it did not do very well. They did not do very well. Now, with that came, they did EEGs to monitor brain activity of these groups. So the groups that was using ChatGPT had less brain activity early on the essay formation because they weren't using their brain, right? ChatGPT was using it. Where the group that was just using good old-fashioned pen and paper, a lot of brain firing. Now, the takeaway is, yes, there's a risk for us becoming lazy. 2 is, if you looked at that last EEG, though, in that group who didn't have ChatGPT, their EEG firings were significantly higher than the pen and paper group at the end. So, what does that mean? It means that, humans have a capacity to learn, and, if you don't use it, you lose it. I think it's true. But ultimately, when you need to access it and you need to use it, you still got it. That was kind of the moral of that story. One study, I don't want to make it sound like that's the reason, that's it. But yes, I think we're concerned about it. We talk about it with our med students too. But again, we can talk about this another time, but you have to have the right prompt. You have to know what the context, you have to ask the right question for this to be useful. And if you don't, you're in trouble.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, the importance of prompting, because prompting is how you get true data, right? You have to ask the right question. And that's where that brain is working, right? Because you're looking for a specific data set, and so that means you need to ask the specific question. And so that causes your brain, you're thinking, right? And so that also plays a role in keeping that brain working, right? Synapse still snapping.
Oh, I have a question over here. Thank you for coming, both of you. I appreciate the outstanding work that Mayo Clinic does. I ain't connected to Mayo Clinic. My doctor, they come in, they set their laptop down there, they're putting in the information and, talking to me. And I wish we were at a point where they had that monitor that does the dialogue and records that. So my question is, how can I, as a patient, encourage or help my physician move in this direction so I can get the better care that I think would get, if they're utilizing all that AI can benefit them?
That's a great question. So we're lucky. We have an embarrassment at Riches and Mayo Clinic, and we're fortunate to work there. The reality is the community physician may not have that. But there are free services that you can use, something called Doximity, for example. And I would encourage you, if you have a physician or a clinician you're using who isn't doing something like this, to say, go to Doximity. It's free to all clinicians. The service on there is, all you do is sign up for the free dictation. You hit a button just like I was showing you, and they can use it too. And they also have the same HIPAA-compliant data information center on Doximity. Again, it costs them nothing. All they have to do is have a DEA license or a medical license. So as a consumer, have your physician raise their game.
Okay, thank you. And so that Doximity is what it's called?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and so that would allow us to actually leave with sort of like a recording of the conversation or a printout of the conversation?
Depending, there's a lot of variables to that, depending on their medical record and how they use it. But in theory, it's pretty quick. So if you and I had a conversation like we're having now, within a matter of 30 seconds to a minute, that Doximity would create a note. And depending on what you could view that note. And I think Dr. Polens and I, in our current scenario, sometimes I'll even show the patient the note before they leave the door, just so they can see it. So the same with that app, they can use it.
I wanted to, go ahead.
Dr. Underhill, I had a question for you, and I had a comment for Elder Hall. I wanted to ask, I know you talked about AI helping with Parkinson's disease. Will it help with neuropathy? I have neuropathy in my left leg. Will it benefit helping with neuropathy?
Well, that's another great question. So I think maybe the idea would be, is it going to help us treat complicated medical problems, like neuropathy?
Yes.
And I think, yes, it will. Will it now? Well, we have what we have now, but will we develop new therapies based on unique circumstances and testing that maybe are decades away if we do it traditionally? But now we might speed up those pharmaceutical trials that would take too long, or help us determine what test to do in this scenario and deliver precision medicine. So I think not just neuropathy, I would think almost every disease process. I like to think if we use it wisely, we'll get better outcomes across the board. Great question.
Thank you. Elder Hall, our son is a writer. He's really good. And he wrote a noir story. And he took a paragraph and he asked AI, what can he change in the story? And it basically rewrote his entire paragraph. and he said it was better than what he wrote. So is that, well, I guess it's just a comment, you know, just how would he benefit from using AI without losing his writing, his original script?
Right, and that's the challenge of writing yourself. That you may read writings that, you know, AI may do much better. Remember, AI is a large language model, so it's got word usage, it's got, you know, unlimited, not unlimited, but close to unlimited in terms of words that can fit into exactly what your son might be talking about. And so really there's, you know, it just looks better, right? And so, but the unique thing about it is that human in the loop, right? That he needs to keep writing like he's writing and let people feel that it's him, right? And that's some of the challenges when you talk about writing your own works. You know, there are tools out there that can draw better than we can draw. But there's a distinction in knowing the difference, the nuances, the errors in human drawing, right? Where AI may get it perfect, where someone might look and say, no, that doesn't look like a human did that, right? So those are some of the nuances when you're talking about comparing AI to human.
I just want to ask a question. How is AI being used to help persons who are maybe paralyzed? And also, as people age, is there a way that they could use AI to assist them in their mobility?
Yeah, I think off the top of my head, I can't name a specific example, but we think about some of those implanted devices like Neuralink. I think you might see some of those pieces return basic function. So if you've lost some neural connection individually, maybe a Neuralink might bring those connections back. So I think we'll see that happen. Hopefully we'll see that happen. As far as so the first question was,
Yeah, as people age, their mobility is challenged. Maybe they could have artificial limbs that simulate human movement.
yeah, I know there's some prototypes out there where they're able to, people, for example, in the military, they'll have individuals who may have had an amputation and they're putting on prosthesis now that can be triggered through, for lack of better words, neural connections from thinking that I want to move my leg, that it might trigger some movement in that artificial limb. So I think we're going to see it. You know, how far down the road that is before its main day, I don't know that answer, but I think we're going to see that happen. I really do.
Agree.
Yeah, it's probably outdated by now, but 15 years ago I did my thesis or dissertation on technology in instructing math for elementary school kids versus an abacus. But my question is, where do we draw the line where AI is beginning to stifle creativity and our ability to think critically?
Wow, that's a great question. It really is. The issue I have with us as humans, right, is that we keep going. You know, we don't know where to stop, and that's the challenge that we face. In fact, part of that big beautiful bill that's being talked about is they actually the plan is to relax some of the regulations that were in compliance that was being written in terms of AI, in terms of getting control of just what can you do, right? And so that's a challenge for us as humans. That's a challenge for us as Americans. It's like, where do you draw the line? And I think that's something we're going to have to continue to face as we keep forging ahead, right? And we have a mindset that if we stop, other nations will keep going in certain areas, right? So that's the challenges that we face as humans and Americans.
Also, I'd like to ask, because I noticed we are talking, the subject you were talking about, how do we handle this? I was maybe concerned about, are doctors trained on the ethics of using artificial intelligence?
That's a wonderful question. So the question was, are current physicians or medical students trained on ethical use of AI? And the short of is it's so new, sir, Probably not. And I think we're trying to put into our medical education, literally as we speak, guidelines and parameters. How do we teach AI to our incoming medical students, but to our current medical students and our residents, not only to our staff, to people we actually work with. And so I think it's such a rapid evolving field. We like to think that when they come in, they'll have a basic accountability of ethos. That's why they're there, and that they'll be willing to take on this new technology, but understand behind it has to be ethical use. And I think we're pretty good. But as of right now, it is being developed as we speak, which should tell you we're behind.
Yeah, I would just suggest that, medical schools need to really understand that needs to be a part of the curriculum, because now the ability to abuse this technology can cause great harm.
If I could just add, the healthcare field definitely needs to do that, but in all fields that needs to be done. I'm also an adjunct professor at Grand Canyon University, and I actually teach ethics. And the conversations I have with my students, for those of us that are older, will blow your mind in their thought processes. And a lot of them are just, let's just move forward. Don't ask questions, let's just move forward. And so I have to paint scenarios of what happens if, whether we're talking about autonomous vehicles, and I work in the engineering department, so we get into things of that sort. And so it's really a requirement, I think, it should be a requirement at every university, that ethics component to this, so.
This is for the doctor. It's kind of along the lines of what's been said, but do you see that love, compassion, and humanity can disappear or decrease in the medical professionals that are coming along? If this is how you were taught from the get-go with the reliance and the dependence on AI, and if so, how would you get that back? Because you talked about bad actors, and I looked at it from that side. If that's not your makeup in the first place, how can that be put, how can you put that love and compassion if it's not taught when we're talking about AI?
Yeah, great question. I think, so the answer to the question is, how do we teach love and compassion incongruent with AI use? Is that what I understand your?
Well, with this generation,
Yeah.
this is what their dependence on. This is what they know from the get-go. So some of those qualities can be out the window.
Yeah, I think when we, bring in medical students and we interview them for a position, I think we have to look at, and I think they do, are they a compassionate human being? Because that's the foundation of being a physician, is you have to have compassion. You can be really smart and have all these check boxes of your application, but at the end of the day, what resonates to the admission staff is, are you a good human or not? Hopefully, and usually they are. I think AI will help in many ways. So I'll give you the example that Dr. Pollins and I will use. We know that with the use of the ambient noise recognition, I can connect with my patient a lot easier. I don't have to worry about, frivolously typing my note or writing notes. I can just listen and connect and be a compassionate partner in the room. And I think that's what we're trying to train our young medical students and our young physicians, is shared decision. You're a partner in this. So I think I'm hopeful that the data will get us to a better treatment program, maybe get the diagnosis right, but will amplify is we don't have to worry about all this extraneous stuff over here. We can focus on you, the patient, and then get you to the next level. So I'm hopeful. I think it's going to be better, but that is going to be part of that admission process. That how do we bring in humans to care for humans?
So as you can see, tonight is a hot topic, because I can tell you, out of all of the presentations we've done, this is probably the one that have the most questions. I think we're going to wrap it up. Dr. Pullins has 2. I have 2. You can give short answers. My question, and I'm going to kind of go to Elder first. I teach health ethics at Arizona State University, and I can tell you the case scenarios that they provide to us, they actually said throw them out because they're so old. I mean, because every year there's something new that's going on, so you have to give them something, and it is not on AI. So now we have to start adding in AI to our case scenarios as we present. But to my question to you, I'm going to start, and then you, and then Doc has 2. You talked about your new car 2 years ago and how you put that information in and how it pops up. What about voice activation? Because I'm on the phone with someone. I'm talking about a Honda's got cars on sale for $269 per month, and all of a sudden I open up my Yahoo and there's the advertisement of Honda having $269 a month for the car.
Yes.
What is going on with that voice activation? Should we be quiet?
Well, that's a great question. But I will tell you this, every phone, I would just say every phone now, unless you have a jitterbug phone, every phone, right, that has a network interface card, you're being tracked. And it's not just that it might be Apple or Samsung. The applications that you install on your device, it automatically turns stuff on, right? It's tracking not only your voice, it's tracking where you've gone, right? So if you go to a dealership, there's an app that's tracking that you just went to Toyota. Okay, so you might start getting not just what you said, but where you went, right? And so everything is always, just remember that when you look at that end user license agreement, and most of us don't read because there's pages of scanning down, right?
Yes.
So we just check the box and install the app, right?
Yeah.
But once we do that installation, if you would go back in your settings, you'll see it turned it on. It turned tracking on. And so you've got to be mindful of that. Is there a way around that? There really isn't, unless you take the battery out of your device everywhere you go. And you notice most of the smartphones today, you can't take the battery out. I mean, you can get the tool and try and do it and try to put it back together. But it used to be you could pop the battery out and go on about your business, right? But now, because there's such a drive for your data, it's such a drive for your information. So I would just say be careful of what apps you're installing. If you install an app, go and look and see what power you've given that app maker to accessing your information.
That's a good one. And Dr. Underhill, just quick question. None of our questions are quick, but they're great. So I wanted to ask you, we're getting mixed messages. A couple of weeks ago, we said, don't go to Google. Don't Google and don't use WebMD and don't look at Wikipedia. But now we're talking about there's this Chat GPT and Copilot that's popping up, and it's okay. Share with us, because one of the things that you've been saying, and maybe some people do not understand, peer-reviewed, evidence-based. Share with us the difference between what you just said and what we've been told in the past.
Yeah, great question. And so I think every clinician maybe has their style. You remember, when you go online, you can find anything that supports an opinion, no matter what your opinion is, and that's the internet. And you can get that too with AI. Ultimately, I peer-reviewed, it means multiple specialists, if you will, people who are experts in the field of which is of interest, have had a comment, they've looked at this and they've verified their stamp of approval. And that would be the same with evidence-based medicine. Evidence means, my neighbor said, I guess God's talking, is that what that is? My neighbor said that this potion works, right? But there's no evidence to suggest that it works for everybody. It's just what my neighbor said. Where evidence might mean we tried this potion in 1,000 people and they all said 96% it worked. That's evidence versus anecdotal evidence, which is he said, she said. And so when we go to our clinicians, or we go to Google or ChatGPT, and it would be worth your time to become a prompt engineer expert. And if you ask the right question, you can inform yourself and get those peer-reviewed, evidence-based questions and answers, and then you bring those to your clinician. And now we're having a shared, I think we both would agree, Dr. Pollins, that an informed patient is so much easier to help. And so if you walk in and you're informed with good peer-reviewed evidence-based medicine, we love it. So what we don't want is, my grandma told me and my neighbor told me. Harder for us. Not that it's wrong, it's just harder for us.
One last question. I think just hearing this conversation, we'll probably have to have a part 2 AI, just to talk about how to use in everyday life. But this is my question, because when I asked the question at the beginning of the session, who had used AI, there's some people who have not. So from your perspective, where should people that haven't, where should they start to get some comfortability of using it?
Well, a great place is Google. If you go to Google, just google.com, you'll see the search box, but you'll also notice, and I put on one of my slides, let's say it's, if it's Google, you'll see a little icon, and it'll light up if colors, and it's letting you know. In fact, now I've noticed that it's the first thing that comes up. Before you scroll down looking for, let's say you typed in Toyota, and before it defined it, AI will have its search box for you to type it there to get, or it'll provide an answer first to you. So that's a great place to go once you understand this is AI. If it's Microsoft, it might be Microsoft Copilot. You'll see the little icon that represents this is AI. This is not just, you in the browser. This is you in the search engines, or the creator of the search engines AI tool. So that's a great way to do. You can ask it a question. In fact, that's one of the things I've done. Being an elder, I was just playing around. I think it was ChatGPT. I asked it to write me a sermon on love, and it wrote me a sermon on love. So you can kind of see its response. Then I could prompt it more specifically and say, write me a graduate level sermon on love. And so the words might be bigger, the direction might be different. So you can, the more you prompt it, the more response you'll get. More specific you get, the more specific it will get. But that's a great place to go to start.
You want to add anything else, Dr. Hill?
Yeah, 100% agree. What you could do, Elder Hall has some slides about what the terminology is, and you could just as easy go to Microsoft Copilot or ChatGPT and type in those names: deep learning, LLM, natural language processing. It'll give you a great information. And the best way to use, we call them prompt engineering, is explain to me like I'm an 8th grader what LLM is, and it will put it in lay terms, and it will tell you what it means. And so I do that a lot with complex topics because it's way up here sometimes, and I don't know computers for the back. Yeah, so I don't know anything about computers.
As well.
So I write literally like that. I think it was a Denzel Washington movie that explain it to me like I was an 8th grader, and ultimately that's what we should do if you don't know the concept that well. Is we can, generally speaking, get all the information we need right from the AI if you know what question to ask. And he gave great slides on just topics. And then Google's great, YouTube's great. Once you get the handle and understand the terminology, then you just put it into action and you'll fly. You'll love it.
Amen. Scripture says, my people perish from a lack of what? So it behooves us. God wants us to research these things out, right? So definitely. You can also, one other area I didn't mention was on our smartphones. You go to the Play Store, or I forgot what Apple's is called, but you can go there and there's AI apps free to download. And you can, it's a free app. You can play with it there as well. So there's a couple of different areas you can go.
Let's give our speakers a hand. Gentlemen, thank you very much. I'm sure this is a topic that we could spend hours on, but I appreciate you coming out. Like I said, we'll have to do a part 2 at some point in time. So thank you for coming out again tonight. Hopefully there's something that you learned and can utilize in your daily lives. I'm going to ask Dr. Logan to come out and give us closing remarks. Let's give him a hand as he comes up.
Wow. I think back to what the prophet Daniel said, that in the last days how knowledge would proliferate. And we are experiencing that today. And as I listened to the 2 experts on the AI talk, I begin to realize how important our Christian faith is going to be in the coming years, because we are going to have to help people to understand that this power that they have has to be harnessed. It has to be directed by love and not by ambition and power. And so it's very important that we, first of all, understand the technology, and even in the church, be able to have some form of ethics as to how it's used. For instance, I was listening to Elder Hall as he was talking about how quickly he got a sermon on love. Well, the problem with that is a sermon without spending time with God is really not going to help the person delivering the sermon. It might help your audience, but what is it doing for the person who's giving the sermon? And so, you know, learning how to hear God and spend time with God is crucial in an age where I can just tell this computer to do this for me. No one's ever going to know that's what I did. But the thing about it is, what the computer produces is not coming from my heart. It's coming from maybe from my head because I'm prompting it and telling it what to do. That is something that we have to really be concerned about, especially with our children, with our families, because it would be so easy for you to just use something that's so convenient. But you lose something when you do that. Just like with Dr. Underhill was saying, how important it is in the medical field that the doctors have some sense of ethics, because this could really get off the rails quickly. And as a believer, it's important that we try to keep our sense of morality, our sense of godliness on par, so that this doesn't get off the rails. And the problem with technology, it happens so fast that sometimes our moral compass is not keeping up with it. And so I really thank the presenters tonight for helping us to understand the good, the bad, and the ugly. I really do appreciate that. And I just pray that we as in the church, we cannot lag behind, because we can't instruct people or give guidance on something that we don't even understand. So if we are using it ourselves, we can tell them some of the caveats that they need to be aware of. Yeah, I know it's easy to do this. However, you have to realize that faith is more than just getting information. It's also about building a relationship and having a connection. But if we don't understand the process, if we just live in the past, that means our families, our children, our nation is plowing ahead into this without the benefit of our spiritual guidance. And so that would be the thing that I would say from a spiritual perspective that's very, very important. Let's give our presenters another hand. And I pray that those who are watching online realize that you can watch this again. Just go to the Antioch app and you'll be able to replay this over and over again to get the information that you need. We're standing. Just want to just remind you that we'll have guest speakers on this coming Sunday. We will have in the 8 a.m. service Supervisor Tiara Johnson. She is the supervisor for Ontario, Canada. And in the 11 o'clock service, we'll have the Bishop of Brazil, Bishop Nathaniel Jefferson, that will be ministering to us. So you don't want to die and go to heaven without giving them a chance to sow into your life. Amen. Again, I want to thank Dr. Pullins. I want to thank Dr. Allen for always doing a tremendous job of bringing before us insightful, impactful speakers that make us better. Let us pray. Father, we are truly grateful that you have brought before us once again tremendous men that are able to enlighten us and to help us to better understand the world in which we live. We thank you for the medical advances. We thank you for the technological advances. Lord, we realize that these are gifts that you have given to humanity. Now, Father, we also pray that you would help us to manage these gifts in a way that's governed by your word. Help us to have integrity. Help us to use what we know to benefit humanity rather than create lawlessness within humanity. Now, Father, we ask that as believers, that we not be afraid of this technology, that we understand that we have a moral obligation to help our world to be able to handle this in a way that will glorify God and benefit humanity. Help us, oh God, to be able to pray and to seek your face, that we might be able to influence humanity, to use the wonderful gifts that God has given us to make our world a better place and a safer place to live. Now, Father, as we leave this place tonight, watch over us and protect us. Let no hurt, harm, or danger come nigh unto us. Bless us to arrive at our home safely and without incident, finding our homes as we left it. And Father, if you do these things for us, we'll be so careful to give your name the praise, the honor, and the glory. And everyone said, Amen. Greet your neighbor. Let them know that you love them with the love of Christ. God bless you.